So the other day, this fork started leaking, so I had to send it back to Fox for some help. And that left me with my super incredibly plush high pivot enduro bike, this GT Force, and it needed a fork that would properly match that incredible rear suspension. I started thinking, what fork do I have that would be that plush? And then I realized, stashed behind my purple jump, I have a perfect fork for a bike like this. This is the Coil sprung Marzocchi Z1 from a few years ago, and there's something special about this. Let's get into it in the video.
I bought this fork all the way back in 2021. While I did get a bit of an industry deal, I still paid more for it back then than it is selling for publicly today. Crazy times, dear bike industry, very crazy times. With the Podium acting the fool with a leaky seal, I decided to tell it it's grounded and send it back home for a week with its parents in Scotts Valley. No TV, no Wi-Fi.
Dad, that's not fair.
Well, it's a lot fairer than not using it for 2 weeks.
From what I could remember, this lowly budget-oriented Z1 Coil, or Zoil, was the next plushest fork I owned. Clearly, it's not as stiff as the Monster Podium fork, but perhaps it would be the next best match for this mega cushy high pivot enduro bike. The Z1 Coil has one major deficiency. Just like the Hulk's rage is his greatest strength, it's also his greatest weakness. In this case, the coil spring allows for insane small bump compliance, but then lacks any sort of significant bottoming resistance. For middle-aged mountain bikers still living teenage BMX dreams,
How do you do, fellow kids?
this means the fork finds the end of its travel very quickly in jumpy, sendy scenarios. When comparing the Z1 Coil to the air-sprung Z1, this was one of my largest complaints.
What was disconcerting about the Coil fork is it was going through the travel really easily and much more often. The air fork has some volume reducers in it, which makes it more progressive.
Next, being a coil-sprung fork, you need to buy the correct spring rate for your weight and ability.
I am within the 150 to 180 weight bracket of the stock medium spring. Everyone online told me that I'm way too heavy for the stock medium spring. I need a firm.
Wait a second, buying more and more stuff. Shouldn't this be a reason why a brand would sell you this? We'll get into that in a bit. So at 175 pounds, running the coil fork at 170 travel, I found the stock medium blue spring to be way too soft for me. After only a few rides, I went for a green firm spring. Firm springs are rated for riders from 180 to 210 pounds. Again, I'm only 175.
And in the comments, many of you told me that the firm spring was still too soft for me.
I mean, sure, the spring is only $47, but you need to know this before you jump into coil forkland. Now with this firm spring, fork sag feels about right. But keep this in mind, if I'm reporting the firm spring to still be on the soft side for my 175-pound weight, this means heavier, aggressive riders, maybe over 200 pounds or so, probably won't find this fork very suitable. Now there is a fix. Sort of. While Fox does not make any sort of dedicated hydraulic bottom-out product for this fork, Fox does make a higher-end damper. The higher-end damper has separate high and low-speed damping circuits, and we can use these to tune that raging plushness into a strong hand that cradles the rider from bottoming endlessly.
Okay, so I've been riding my here Ripmo with the to-go and rear shock. It feels good, but it's outriding the fork. And I do like these Fox 36 Grip 2s quite a bit. Right now, it's okay, but it's not balanced. The back end is more stuck to the ground, just more oomph than the front end. Right now, the weak link is the fork. I think it could be better balanced and matched that rear shock with a little bit of tuning. So we have something custom up our sleeves. Enter something custom. This is a Marzocchi Z1 Coil fork here on the Ripmo AF. I just sourced some parts and I'm gonna hop up this Z1 fork to be essentially a great mate to that to-go rear shock.
I've made a few videos with this fork. I rode it on the original Ibis Ripmo AF, did a back-to-back comparison against the Z1 Air fork, rode it on the Ripmo V2S, the Ripmo V3, and most recently, used it on my GT Force.
This Z1 Coil has a few years underneath various bikes of mine, and you can tell by looking at it. However, one way I can make older things like this look a lot nicer is by using a rejuvenator, like Formula 100's Ride and Shine. Formula 100 has partnered with me to help support this video, and I've been using Ride and Shine on most of my personal products and bikes. This stuff's great. It has polyshield technology, and if you spray it on something like this, give it a moment to start soaking in, well, once you do go through and give it the old polish, it really turns something that's pretty beat up into looking way nicer and fresher. What's great about Ride and Shine is that it dries hard so that it's not gonna attract things like dust. In fact, it does the opposite and it repels things like dust, sweat, and it provides a bit of UV protection, both A and B on top of that. On the stanchions, it actually creates a little bit of lubrication so you get a little bit even smoother suspension action. I've got a link to all the Formula 100 products available at Jensen USA in the description down below. Ride and Shine is one of my personal favorites, and when I go to sell an old bike, I absolutely wash it very carefully and then coat that thing in Ride and Shine. Makes older things look amazing. Huge thanks to Formula 100 for their support. Take a look at the link down below to check out all the Formula 100 stuff at Jensen USA. Let's go find out how good, or perhaps poorly, this Z1 coil feels in 2025.
My Z1 coil is an older unit and came with the older grip damper. It honestly works quite well. Back in the day, I reviewed this Z1 fork and said for most riders in most places, the grip setup is absolutely fine. Since then, Marzocchi have shifted the Z1 coil down to the rail damper. I still have ridden the rail damper on the much smaller Marzocchi Z2 fork on the Marin Rift Zone and found it to be okay. However, I haven't ridden the rail damper on a longer travel, beefier fork like this coil-sprung Z1.
So the star of the show is still in its packaging. Let's pull that out. Behold, the star of the show, the Fox Grip 2 damper. I'm gonna swap this onto the Z1. This is not exactly the most new. The new would be a GripX, and I couldn't find that anywhere.
I would love to tell you all that the Grip 2 damper immediately fixed all my coil-sprung woes. It showed promise, but straight up, out of the box, it wasn't amazing. It was slightly sticky, making it feel like I had not made the ultimate fork, but made an ultimate mistake. Bit by bit, the Zoil started to feel better. I don't think it's a secret that suspension products, especially forks, need some time to break in. But in this case, the lowers were already feeling amazing. It was just that the Grip 2 damper needed some ride time. After years of testing new forks, I did find this surprising. I had thought the fork bushings were what needed the most break-in time, not a damper. And I'm so glad that I didn't give up after the first few rides. I rode the Zoil on the Ripmo V2S a few times. I rode it on the Ripmo V3, where it started to feel a little bit better.
Oh God.
And when the Fox Podium on the GT4 started leaking excessive oil, I swapped it on there.
Bottom out.
And finally, I rode it on the Norco Sight VLT CX5 e-mountain bike. I took a solid dozen hard rides, but the damper is now broken in and feeling very proper. With that break-in, holy moly, this allows Hulk to smash through all those roots. Fox will never really tell you that forks need to break in, and that this will be a different amount of time for every fork and every damper. But it is absolutely a thing. Even the podium fork feels better and better the first few rides. Now that it's broken in, the Grip 2 damper is doing exactly as I want.
This is one of the rootier sections in our local trail network, and this is where I love having good front end traction and good small bump sensitivity. The coil fork works fantastically through all these little roots. Now the Grip 2 damper, I have it all the way maxed out with high speed compression, -1 click. And then I have the low speed exactly in the middle. I counted 12 clicks, I'm at 6. With that setup, it feels pretty controlled. It doesn't feel too stiff to move when I hit stuff. I did use some Formula 100 Ride Shine on the stanchions. Hopefully that makes things just a little bit more slippery. It's a silicone-based spray. From riding the rigid bike and then coming over here to the full squish, I can tell you one thing. Suspension is not just comfort, it's really more about control of your bicycle. And as you're coming through all of these crazy routes, each time you drop down one, you know, if there's no suspension, it just jolts you right away. But if you do have that forgiveness, it delays that jolt. So it doesn't just affect the direction you're going in and your posture on the bike nearly as much. So we understand that suspension creates that forgiveness that gives us control. So why do we have damping? Well, as the suspension is cycling, you can end up getting really deep into your travel and you can bottom out. And once you've bottomed out, your suspension is no longer helping. Also, as it's moving through the travel, that's not necessarily a good thing because it's changing the bike's geometry. So when we add damping, it slows how it goes through all that travel. If you add too much, when you hit all this junk, it's gonna be really bumpy and it's not gonna cycle, it's not gonna move, and you'll have less control. So you gotta have enough damping that it slows it down as much as you can without it getting deflected and being too firm on this stuff. This is a good reason why the GripX2 damper is an upgrade over this older Grip 2. But even with this older Grip 2, once it broke in, it's still pretty good to smash through all this stuff.
Yes, Fox released the GripX and GripX2 dampers just last year. Either one would definitely be an upgrade over this older Grip 2. But I built this fork before the release of those newer dampers.
I bought them out there every time.
And when I went searching in the yard, I was unable to find a fox tree with dampers blossoming each fall. If any of you do have a fresh harvest of GripX2, I'm plenty hungry to enjoy that fruit.
Okay, that is a little bit plusher. Whoa.
So why won't Fox use a coil spring in the Burley 38 chassis? Or slip this simple coil into that nice new 36 all-mountain chassis that's been oh so lovely? It's hard to find a clear answer.
Yoink.
Is it optics? Fox has a history of performance air springs dating all the way back to Bob Fox's first product, an air shock for his Mako. Would embracing a coil be seen as a break from the company's ethos? I feel like Fox is not really guilty of this, as they've definitely embraced all kinds of different ideas. Just earlier this year, Fox ditched its long-term relationship with twin-tube dampers and switched over on the X2 to a monotube design. Fox has even produced electronic suspension with live valve, and they've done inverted forks with the new podium. And many years ago, Fox did make a coil-sprung trail fork, the Vanilla. And going back just over a decade, the 40 downhill fork was also a coil spring. I feel like Fox is a never-say-never type brand. I don't think they're too proud to ignore performance. Now, is it cost? Are air springs more expensive to manufacture and therefore driving more profit? I don't believe this to be the case at all. If Fox wanted to make the most expensive fork possible, there are many areas where they could simply source more exotic materials to do the same thing. If anything, I've heard that coil spring kits are actually more expensive. Regardless, choosing a design solely on pricing high is not a viable long-term business model. Now, is it weight? This may be a factor. Coil springs are by nature heavier than, well, a bunch of air. This Zoil, the Grip 2 damper, weighs 5.6 pounds on my scale, or 2,535 grams if an emergency room visit doesn't cost you 6 digits. To be fair, I don't know the fork market as well as an actual fork brand. Maybe weight is a bigger factor than I'm thinking. But I know that for me, even the weight of the podium fork at just over 6 pounds seems acceptable. As long as this weight comes with amazing performance, which the Zoil does, well, weight then doesn't seem all that critical. Does Fox not sell this fork out of fear it'll outperform more expensive premium options? I mean, I swapped a $2,000 podium fork with a $350 coil-sprung budget item. What? The small bulb compliance of the coil fork is absolutely on par with that podium, maybe even better. Regardless of which fork's plusher, we're all the winners here, as both forks are plusher than Jeff Bridges' bathrobe.
You know, that's just like your opinion, man.
But plushness is not the whole story. The little 36mm old-school chassis of the Z1 does give up significant stiffness compared to that podium. I still find myself picking way gnarlier lines aboard the podium than I'd even consider with the little Z1. While the Z1 is the plushest trail fork I've ridden, the podium is an enduro fork that gives you next-level DH bike capability. So why does Fox not sell this fork? A Zoil with GripX2, and especially with that latest crown and lower development from the 36 All Mountain, that would make for an amazing fork. But personally, I think Fox's choice to not sell this is simply SKU management. Fox knows this business well and likely knows that the convenience, performance, and weight of that air spring is what customers actually want. And to build a Zoil, along with all the different spring rates, would add significantly more SKUs for the brand to manage. Keeping laser focused on your most commercially viable products is simply good business. So yes, you too can build up a Zoil, and now you can likely find either a GripX or GripX2 damper. I would use GripX for most acoustic bikes and for riders weighing less than 200 pounds. For e-mountain bikes or heavier riders, I would use the GripX2 damper. Be prepared that even the firmest spring rate may still be too soft for many of you. This is a somewhat niche product, but I certainly learned a thing or two through my experiences aboard the Zoil.
Ew! That's so fun.
I love how these cats hate each other inside, but then outside they're little bros. Got a cat underneath me. Huh. So a little while ago, I'm gonna try this again.